be me. 26, mid-level marketing analyst, decent apartment, decent paycheck, decent life. I've got my own place in the city, a circle of friends who all say they're focusing on themselves, and a dating history that looks like a graveyard of almost relationships. I've always told people I don't need anyone. I like my space, my control, my freedom. Relationships just complicate things. I hadn't seen Evan in 6 months, not since the night we finally admitted what we both already knew, that we wanted completely different things, but were too stubborn to say it out loud. Still, when he texted me out of nowhere, "Coffee sometime?" Just to catch up, I said yes. I told myself it was curiosity, not nostalgia. But if I'm being honest, part of me wanted him to see I was doing fine, thriving even. We met at a friend's backyard barbecue. He was the quiet guy helping stack chairs while everyone else drank. There was something old school about him, the kind of calm confidence that doesn't need to announce itself. When he asked for my number, I liked that he didn't play games. No smooth lines, just, "I'd like to see you again." He was solid, hand steady, words direct, no performative charm. He texted good morning, called when he said he would, showed up on time. At first, that steadiness was refreshing. After years of dating guys who ghosted after 3 dates or treated emotional unavailability like a personality trait, Evan felt like a man who actually meant what he said. But as months passed, that same steadiness started to feel heavy, predictable. He liked structure, weeknight dinners, weekend hikes, budgeting apps, and 5-year plans. I liked spontaneity, late nights, last-minute plans, freedom. He wanted roots. I wanted wings. The real breaking point started small. We were sitting on his couch one night, movie playing, when he paused the screen mid-scene and said, casually, "You ever think about what kind of wedding you'd want?" I laughed, like he'd just told a joke. "You're serious?" He smiled. "I mean, yeah. I'm not saying right now, but someday, with the right person." "Yeah, well, not me," I said, half joking. "I don't do weddings." "Or marriage." He looked thrown. "Why not?" "Because it's a trap," I said. "You sign a contract to make the government your third wheel. You lose freedom, identity, options, and the guy usually benefits more anyway." He frowned, trying to hide it behind a sip of his drink. "That's not how I see it." "I think marriage is about building something together." I smirked. "Yeah, until she's doing all the building while he takes the credit." He let out a slow breath, set his glass down. "You really believe all that?" "I've seen enough. My mom, my aunts, my co-workers. Married, bitter, stretched thin. It's always the woman sacrificing, not the man." He didn't argue. "That's the thing about Evan. He never raised his voice. He'd just go quiet. And that silence would make me angrier than any yelling could." We stayed together after that, but something changed. He started tiptoeing around topics like commitment or family. I started pulling back whenever things felt too domestic, skipping dinner plans, avoiding weekends at his place, acting too busy. Sometimes he'd try to talk. "You act like I'm trying to own you," he said once. "I just want us to have goals." "Exactly," I shot back. "You want us to have goals." "I have my own," he sighed. "You don't even see how defensive you get whenever someone cares about you." "Maybe I just don't want to be another man's project," I said. That one stung him. I could see it, the way he went still, jaw tightening for half a second. By month 14, we were fighting over everything. How often we saw each other, how serious it was, even stupid things like grocery lists. The final fight came over dinner. He had made pasta, my favorite, and told me he was thinking about trading in his condo for a house someday. He said someday like it was a dream worth sharing, and I laughed right in his face. He stared at me, trying to understand what was funny. You really think I'd want to be tied down like that? I said. A house? A mortgage? What, next you'll ask me to quit my job and bake bread? That's not what I said. You just want some domestic doll who'll make you feel like a man. That time, he didn't even argue. He just stood up from the table, walked to the sink, and rinsed his plate in silence. 2 days later, he ended it over text. You're a great person, but we're not heading in the same direction. Take care of yourself. I told everyone he was intimidated by me, that he couldn't handle an independent woman. So now, sitting across from him in the same coffee shop we used to haunt on lazy Sundays, I felt like I had something to prove. He looked good, calmer somehow. Lighter. Hey, he said, smiling politely as I walked in. Hey yourself, I replied, sitting down. Still working yourself to death? He chuckled. Pretty much. But I like it. Keeps me sane. We talked about work, traffic, old mutual friends. Harmless, safe topics. For a few minutes, it almost felt like the old days, before all the tension, before I turned every kind gesture into an argument about patriarchy. Then came that question. You ever think about marriage or settling down? I laughed before I even thought about it. Marriage? Please. That's just an outdated contract men benefit from. You guys get free labor and sex. Women lose everything. I never let him sleep with me before, so don't worry, I won that one. He raised an eyebrow. You really think that? Most men I know lose half their stuff and never see their kids when it ends. I waved a hand, rolling my eyes. Maybe those guys just couldn't handle strong women. He didn't say a word for a while, just stared into his cup, stirring slowly. Then he set the spoon down, voice low but steady. You keep saying you don't need a man. Just be careful not to become someone no man can love. No anger, no bitterness, just sadness. He left a $5 under his mug, gave a small nod, and walked out. I sat there, heart thudding, pretending it didn't sting. I told myself he was just bitter, maybe still hurt. But there was something in his tone I couldn't shake. Not judgment, not spite. Just quiet finality. Like he'd finally made peace with losing me. And I hadn't realized until then that I'd already lost him long before that coffee. It had been a few months since that coffee with Evan. I threw myself into work afterward. Longer hours, more projects, anything that kept my mind busy. I told myself I'd leveled up. Promotions, bonuses, new clothes, new haircut. All the boxes checked. But sometimes, in quieter moments, the train ride home, the walk from the parking garage, that one line would echo. Be careful not to become someone no man can love. I'd shake it off. Call it a guilt trip from a guy who couldn't handle me. Then one Tuesday afternoon, in the break room at work, that same kind of conversation came up again. It started with Melissa. She'd just gotten engaged and was flashing her ring like a solar flare. Half the women circled around her, squealing about venues and dresses. I stayed back, pretending to scroll on my phone. Tom, one of the senior analysts, late 40s, divorced, poured coffee and chuckled. Enjoy it while it lasts, he said. Marriage is great until it's not. Melissa laughed. You sound bitter? Tom shrugged. Just realistic. I don't know what made me jump in. Maybe the tone, maybe the memory of Evan. Come on, I said. Men have it way easier in marriage. Even divorce favors them. Women do most of the emotional labor, handle the home, and when it falls apart, guys just move on. Tom gave me this look. Not angry, just tired. You ever actually talk to divorced men about that? You might be surprised who really loses. I blinked. I've read the stats. Reading about it isn't the same as living it. He took his mug and left. It shouldn't have bothered me, but it did. That night, lying on my couch with my laptop open, I kept replaying his tone, calm, factual, not defensive, like a man who'd stopped trying to convince anyone of his pain. I decided I'd prove him wrong. If men really had it so bad, surely there'd be evidence of all their supposed struggles, right? There had to be statistics, articles, something that showed how much easier men still had it compared to women. So I started drafting questions, telling myself it was a social project. Something about modern relationships and fairness after divorce. It sounded intellectual enough to justify the curiosity. To be honest, I'd always been like that. A little too eager to turn real life into experiments. I liked feeling like the smart one in the room, the one who could see through everyone else's blind spots. In college, I'd once done an entire paper debunking gender pay gap myths, not because I doubted them, but because I wanted to crush the counter-arguments so hard no one could touch them. I lived for that kind of validation. So this new project, same energy, different subject, I was sure I'd come out on top again. The next morning, I brought it up to my friends during lunch. I think I'm going to do this mini-study, I said, opening my salad container. Talk to a few divorce guys, see how their experiences compare to women's. Maybe write about it later, Tina, my closest friend, smirked. You mean you're about to collect free content for your next rant? I laughed. Pretty much. I already know how it'll go. Men whining about how unfair the courts are, conveniently forgetting who carried the mental load. Exactly, said Priya, rolling her eyes. They always make themselves the victims. Can't wait to hear the excuses. We all laughed, and someone joked about how I should record it and make a podcast episode called Crying in Custody Court. It felt harmless, just another inside joke among friends who saw the world the same way. That night, though, I sat back down with my laptop and actually started sending messages. I reached out to a few acquaintances through mutual friends, co-workers' cousins, someone's uncle, a guy from a local community group. Within a week, I had 2 people willing to meet. At the time, it felt exciting, like I was setting up a small personal experiment that would confirm everything I already believed. I didn't realize I was also setting up the moment my beliefs would start to fall apart, one quiet conversation at a time. We met at a diner off the highway, one of those places with chipped mugs, faded booths, and a bell that jingled every time someone came in. His name was David, early 40s, IT guy, 2 kids. He looked ordinary in a way that made him easy to underestimate. Jeans, button-up shirt, clean haircut, polite handshake. When I explained my project, he listened quietly, nodding every few seconds, but his face didn't change much. "I've been through it all," he said finally. "So if you're looking for a headline, you'll find one." His tone wasn't defensive, more like a man who'd said this too many times before. He told me he'd been married 10 years. His wife left when their youngest turned 5, claimed he was emotionally neglectful. He said it flatly, no bitterness, like he'd repeated the story to lawyers and social workers until the words stopped meaning anything. "I was working from home back then," he said. "She had a full-time job downtown. I did the lunches, school drop-offs, doctor appointments, all that." I asked, "So what happened during the divorce? Didn't the judge see that?" He gave a short laugh. "That's the thing. Everyone saw it. Didn't matter." Then he reached into his bag and slid a manila folder across the table. Inside were court papers, custody evaluations, letters, neat handwriting, highlighted paragraphs. "Here," he said, tapping one page. "Custody evaluation. I was the primary caregiver. Still lost full custody." I skimmed the lines he'd marked in yellow. "Mother's bond deemed more essential. Father to pay child support." My throat tightened. but I tried to keep my voice even. That's awful, I said carefully. But maybe the judge just thought that she was a better parent because she cried in court, he said, not unkindly. They always think tears mean truth. He smiled faintly after that, the kind of smile that doesn't change a person's eyes. I tried another angle, more cautious. Have you tried appealing? Maybe with new evidence or something? He shook his head. Costs too much. Lawyer said I'd just look obsessive. You're supposed to move on. He reached into his wallet and pulled out a photo. 2 little girls at a playground, one missing a front tooth, both red-haired like him. Haven't seen them in 4 months, he said softly. She blocked me after I was a week late on a payment. I didn't know what to say. The waiter came by to refill our coffees. David thanked him automatically, like he was forcing normalcy back into the moment. When we were alone again, I tried to ask something neutral. Do you ever talk to her at all? About the kids? Emails only. Through her lawyer, he said. If I ask about school, she says I'm harassing her. He took another sip of coffee, then looked up at me. You ever notice how people assume the dad did something wrong? You probably thought that too, I hesitated. Maybe a little, I admitted. Don't worry, he said quietly. Most people do. We sat in silence after that. The clatter of dishes in the kitchen filled the gaps. I nodded, pretending neutrality, scribbling notes just to have something to do with my hands. But something in my stomach twisted. Still, I told myself there had to be more to it. People don't lose custody for no reason, right? A week later, I met Mark, mid-40s, accountant. He was already seated when I arrived, a stack of papers lined up next to his plate, like he was prepping for a client meeting. When I introduced myself and started explaining my relationship fairness project, he nodded once, expression neutral. You want numbers? Here, he said, sliding the papers over before I even finished. Pay stubs, court orders, bank summaries, everything in perfect columns. 14 years married, he said. She left. Took half the house, got alimony for 5 years. Then she remarried overseas. Didn't file the paperwork here. Guess who's still paying? He tapped the total at the bottom, a figure that left him with barely enough to live on. I used to think I was doing everything right, he added. Work, provide, save for retirement. Turns out that just made me easier to strip clean. He said it flatly, not with bitterness, but the practiced exhaustion of someone who's told this story too many times and stopped expecting anyone to care. I asked quietly, So wait, your lawyer can't do anything about it? Tried, he said, but to stop paying, I'd have to take her to court in another country. Legal fees would cost more than the payments themselves. It's cheaper to keep losing. He stirred his coffee once, slowly, eyes on the cup. I don't hate her, he said. I just hate that the system decided my life was disposable. The words hung there longer than they should have. I felt the air between us thicken, not tension exactly, just the kind of silence that makes you aware of your own breathing. I tried to sound casual. Well, maybe it's just your case, I offered weakly. Not every divorce turns out like that. He smiled faintly. Sure. Then he leaned back, eyes meeting mine. But you asked why men don't want to get married anymore. That's your answer. Something about the way he said you made it feel personal. Not angry, just certain. Like he already knew the kind of woman I was when I walked in. There was a pause. Then he asked, You married? I shook my head. No. Dated someone for a while, though. He was, I don't know, too traditional. Wanted the house, the kids, all that. I wasn't ready for that kind of life. Mark tilted his head slightly, studying me. So, he was a good guy then? I hesitated. Yeah. He was. Just not what I wanted. He gave a small, almost sad smile. You might want to apologize to him someday. Not because you did something wrong, just because you'll realize what it cost him to mean well. I didn't answer, just pretended to jot something down in my notebook. But his words landed harder than I wanted to admit. I closed the notebook and thanked him for his time. He nodded once and turned back to his coffee. Outside, I sat in my car for a minute before starting it. The folder he'd given me was on the seat beside me. I didn't open it. I just stared at it and thought, he lost almost everything, and somehow he still sounded like the one who had to explain himself, and for the first time I wondered if Evan ever felt like that too. I brought my notes to wine night at Tina's. I thought they'd be interested. I thought we'd debate. I talked to 2 divorced guys, I started. It's not as simple as I thought. Priya smirked. Let me guess. They cried about money. Actually, one lost custody even though he was the primary caregiver, I said. The other's still paying alimony because she remarried overseas and never filed here. Tina's smile thinned. Why are you repeating their side? Because it's true, I said, and we keep acting like men can't be hurt by the system. Silence. Then Melissa. This sounds like pick-me stuff. I swallowed. It's not. I'm just, Priya cut in, you're centering men again. Since when? Since I realized I might have been unfair, I said. To Evan? To a lot of people? Tina set down her glass. This isn't you. You're letting some sad stories guilt you. Don't bring this to the group chat. I'm not asking for permission, I said. I'm saying we could be wrong. Nobody answered. We watched a reality show in forced silence. On my way home, I checked the chat. My last 3 messages were ignored. 10 minutes later, I couldn't see the chat at all. Removed. I sat in my car until the screen stopped blurring. Then I opened Evan's old thread. The last thing there was his goodbye text. I typed, I owe you an apology, coffee, and hit send, green bubble. Message not delivered. I tried email. Bounce back. On Saturday morning, I drove to his condo, rehearsing what I'd say if he answered. A guy I didn't recognize opened the door. Evan moved months ago, he said. Think he bought a house across town? I didn't have an address. I had the coffee shop we used to go to, so I went there, sat at our table, and waited with a latte I didn't drink. An hour later, I heard a voice I knew. I turned. Evan walked in, holding a baby carrier. A woman followed, brown hair in a low bun, soft sweater, wedding band catching the light. She touched his shoulder as they stepped aside to order. He saw me, surprised. Hey. I stood. Hi, I. He glanced at the carrier and back at me. This is Nora, he said, nodding toward the woman, and this is Lily. He smiled down at the baby. She's 3 months. My throat tightened. She's beautiful. Thank you, Nora said kindly. I forced the words out. Evan, I'm sorry. For how I treated you, for laughing when you talked about a future. You don't deserve that he held my gaze. No anger, just that same steady quiet. I appreciate you saying it. I nodded, uselessly. I thought maybe we could talk sometime. He looked at Nora, then back to me. I don't think that's a good idea. Right. Of course, he shifted the carrier. I'm glad things ended when they did, he said softly. If we'd married, we'd both be miserable. Maybe divorced. I watched them leave, the door swinging shut behind them, and realized I'd run out of people to prove wrong. My friend were gone, he'd moved on, and all I had left were the things I thought made me strong. Now I'm not even sure what I believe anymore.